morning actually, and saying a number of things, and one issue of course that kept coming up and has been a topic of conversation for a number of years now is the e-tolls. So let's catch up with somebody who's been fighting that cause. He joins us in studio now, Wayne Duvenage from the organisation Undoing Tax Abuse. Wayne, thanks very much indeed for joining us. You would have listened to the Premier's
yes.
State of the Province address, and one of the big issues for you that you would have been listening out for was what's going to happen to the e-tolls. Your reaction to what was said?
Well, we've heard this before, and not just recently, and not even before the elections, but a couple of years now, that e-tolls has no place in Gauteng. And yet they continue to limp along. And I say limp along because the compliance levels a year ago were down to 25%. We think they're down to 20% now. Why do we say that? Is because they've stopped the issuing of summonses. There was a temporary decision made by the SANRAL board in March. We also recall that the Credit Bureau Association has said that e-toll debt will not be a blacklisting matter, and I think the public are now really fed up. Those few that were paying now is getting less and less. Some companies have decided the money's better in their bank account than in SANRAL's if it's going to be scrapped, because if it is scrapped, people who've been paying are not going to get their funds back. So now we say to the Premier, you know, you've got to force government to make this decision, because it is just really half-baked now, and it's in limbo, and there are people that are still paying, and this is costing them. They are not employing people, staff, as a result of, you know, tens of thousands of rands a month in e-toll bills. And
so what kind of conversations have you had with the Premier's office, and what has he said to you?
Well, he said exactly this. You know, we are going to be meeting with the national authorities, and we've made our point clear, and we believe there is an appetite by national government to halt e-tolls, to find an alternative. And we've even heard from the national authorities that they would meet with civil society. They haven't met yet. There are indications that they would like to meet to find the alternatives, and there are alternatives, because this was the worst decision they could have made 10 years ago when they ticked the box of going e-tolls.
All right, so as citizens, we're a little confused, because it wasn't that long ago that we heard the keeper of the National Treasury, Finance Minister, saying that no, people must pay their e-tolls.
Yes, and that was after the decision by the board to say they're not going to chase the debt.
So, what do we make of this? Who's talking to who if the finance minister is saying one thing?
Yeah, well, he has to say that because they have bonds and they have to honour those bonds, and we understand that, but there are many ways to pay off that debt, as we've said, and I'm a bit concerned that the Premier said that now the province will help finance some of that debt. It'll be interesting to know, because that debt was entered into from a national office point of view. So we'd be very keen to see how they balance the books there. These are national roads. They need to be funded through national taxes. It's social infrastructure. As we've said, these are roads we use to get to and from work and places of worship and sport. You know, fed into the national coffers is the fuel levy, which at the time of the e-toll decision was 24 billion a year. That's close to 80 billion. The money's there. They've just got to allocate it properly.
All right, so, you know, again, people might be wondering, you're quite happy to pay e-tolls when you go from here to Durban, here to Polokwane. What's the difference between paying those tolls and Gauteng?
Well, firstly, those long distance, they're not e-tolls, they're just normal tolling. That is 100% hit rate. The barrier doesn't open until you pay. Right. There's an issue around the tariffs there, and that's another matter we'll come back to later. Whereas this scheme is a drive now, pay later scheme, and what you want is government to enter into systems and processes that work. You don't want a situation on a user pays scheme where only half the people are paying and the other half aren't, because then it's unfair, and that's exactly what was always going to happen on e-tolls. They were never going to enforce it. E-Natus is inaccurate. It relies on the post office. That is grossly inefficient. And so everything pointed to a failed scheme. Plus, the administration costs before 1 rand goes into the tarmac. The contract was signed with ETC at 1.6 billion rand a year. Now, why would you pay an extra 61% at administration cost to settle a bond of 2.6 billion rand a year? So it was grossly flawed and expensive, and there's some question marks around why ETC was going to make so much money, because they've been able to manage the scheme on less than 600 billion or 6 to 700 million rand a year, and they were going to get, if everything went their way, 1.6 billion rand a year, an extra billion rand. Big question marks there. So it's time to pull the plug. The contract is over. It finished last year. Why they continue to allow this to limp along?
So what is the alternative? What can we do to pay for these roads?
Well, the Treasury allocates grants to SANRAL, and they have been doing in the past for road upgrades and infrastructure upgrade. And remember, the other thing about the difference between these routes and the Gauteng route is this is social infrastructure. It's the road we use daily. We don't go to Durban and Mpumalanga daily. Those are economic corridors linking up cities. This is the stuff we travel on every day to get to and from work, which is why you need to fund it through what we pay taxes for. So you take taxpayers' money and you allocate that to SANRAL, because only 3,000 out of their 22,000 kilometers of roads are tolled, and then SANRAL allocates those roads to road construction. And Treasury's coffers are topped up, as I said, by the fuel levy as well. And had they have applied the plan that we suggested when they decided on e-tolls back in 2008 and added 10 cents to the fuel levy, guess what? This whole infrastructure of 18 billion rand would have been paid for, and yet they haven't paid a cent. So they didn't listen to society. They ignored the warnings of society. Now they're paying the price of higher costs because the interest has been building up on this one.
So is the fuel levy still an option then?
It is. It's a little bit more expensive. Now it's probably closer to 16, 17 cents a litre. But they increased the fuel levy over that same period by 2 rand 30 cents. So we still say the money's there. Obviously the country's a lot poorer. We're in a lot more problems and debt now as a result of Eskom, SAA. It's going to be tougher to find the money. But to apply a scheme that was never going to work and to continue to flog it, that's the worst decision. There's never a better time to end a bad decision than now.
All right, so whose signature is required?
The Minister of Transport, certainly, and probably the President. And I think they both realise that they've got to go down this road. It's just, we now need to find the solution, the alternative. And it's not going to be difficult, but they need, every day they wait, the interest rate piles up.
Do you think, when you look back, that this was a significant issue in the last polls, because the ANC that could have signed didn't sign, and they had a reduced majority in the Gauteng legislature? I mean, they literally just crossed the line. So that this could be last chance saloon.
It was. We were surprised they did cross the line. It is a political issue. It was a one-party decision when it was made back 10 years ago, and it's cost the party dearly. And I think as society, this has been a good example of how civil society can stand together, can send the message to government: we're not going to play your games when you set up processes and policies that really make you suffer from this crisis of legitimacy when you cannot manage your own processes. So, take heed and consult more meaningfully with society. Otherwise, you're going to pay these penalties all the time. And ultimately, we pay. And that's the saddest thing. It's going to come out of our taxes.
The longer we wait, the more money that's wasted.
Exactly.
All right.
Exactly.
Wayne, we're going to have to leave it there.
That's
Thanks very much indeed. Let's hope that sometime soon, when we have this conversation, something will have been signed and something definite in the pipeline. Thanks so much indeed for your time.
Pleasure.
Okay.